Hi, everyone. Welcome back to our podcast, No More Secrets. As always, I'm your niece, Katie Albrecht.
And I'm your aunt, Mary Albrecht. And today we have guests on. One of them is a repeat guest, Delores Garcia. And Delores Garcia is a certified angel coach. She has a variety of titles, actually, but she's actually here to share a more personal story today. So we'll just leave it at that. But she does have her coach and friend, Sue Elliot, with her. Say hello, Sue. Hello, Sue.
Hello, Sue Elliot.
And Sue Elliot is an angel coach, and she said it's her own unique blend of life and business coaching, energy healing, and delivering guidance from the angels. So very spiritual. And she has been helping Delores through a very, very difficult time and was even laying groundwork prior to that difficult event that we're going to talk about today. And we are going to also take this tragic event and turn it into good, which we're already doing. Okay, we're going to talk. The name of our episode is Miguel Matters, and Miguel is Dolores's son. So, Delores, tell us about the phone call you received from your ex-husband on July 3rd of this year.
Yeah, well, and to be clear, it was actually a text exchange.
Okay.
And Hector is my former husband. He and I had been divorced for about 5-6 years, and we have a good relationship, friendly relationship. We obviously still have our kids together, and he wouldn't very often reach out to me, but July 3rd, about 9:30 at night, he texts me and says, boy, this kid is driving me crazy. And I'm like, what's going on? And he says that he was just talking really weird stuff. And he just, Hector just couldn't handle it. And it was driving him crazy. And, I'm going to be honest with you, it's 9:30 at night. And like, I don't want to start a conversation with Miguel. And so I said, is he high? Is he drunk? Like, why is he talking like that? And Hector's like, no, I don't think he is. And I said, well, would it help for me to call him in the morning and talk to him? And he goes, well, it couldn't hurt. And I said, okay, well, I'll call him in the morning. And
just to back up, Miguel lived with Hector in
yes,
this
and
scenario.
Miguel is 24.
Okay.
Oh, he lived with them at the time?
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
Yeah. And they're about 3 hours east of where I live. They lived in eastern Arizona. And so I went to bed, and when I got up in the morning, I texted Miguel because he's not going to be awake when I wake up. And so I just texted him and I said, good morning, sunshine. What are your plans for today? Because it was the 4th of July. And as the day unfolded, there were a lot of things that were coming together. My daughter, who is 22, lives in southern New Mexico. So we're all kind of right here together within a couple hours. And she actually lives with Hector's mom, with her grandmother. And she calls me on Monday morning. And that was really weird. I'm like, she'll Snapchat me, but she hardly ever calls me.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, Mom, something's going on, because the police came over here and they were talking to another lady that lives there is Alejandra's aunt. And she's like, they were talking to her and asking all these questions about, the family members, and where is Carmen, who is the grandmother, where is she, and phone numbers and all of this. And Alejandra, I really believe that she is a very strong, intuitive soul. And she's like, something's going on. And she tried to call her dad, And I said, well, call your dad on his work phone because sometimes he has to work on the holidays. And she goes, there's no answer. And, she's like, Mom, like something's going on. And I said, well, and Miguel had not answered my text. And so I said, do you want me to drive to your dad's house? 2.5, 3 hours from my house. And she goes, yeah, something's going on. And so, and I could feel it too. So I went upstairs to finish getting ready. And in the meantime, my sister-in-law, which I guess is my ex-sister-in-law, Hector's sister, she called me and she told me that the police had come. So are you getting this? This is all convoluted to me.
Yeah. It's clear. Yeah.
Carmen, who is the grandma, who is Hector's mom, was visiting up in Utah with the sister. So Carmen's not in southern New Mexico. She's up in Utah. The police are looking to talk to Carmen. And so the police up in Utah had gone over to Lisa's house, the sister-in-law, and broke the news to them that there had been a double death, a double homicide, that as the story unfolded and what it looked like at that point was that Miguel had gone into Hector's room when he was sleeping and about 1 o'clock on Monday morning and fatally stabbed him with a kitchen knife. And then Miguel left the house and attempted to break into one neighbor's house, but broke the window but couldn't get in. So he went to another neighbor's house and broke a window and got into the house. And the neighbor, kind of terrorizing the neighbors. He was all bloody. He had a knife. The news report said that Miguel told the neighbor that he was going to have to kill him to get him to stop. And the neighbor was able to get his own handgun and fatally shot Miguel in their house. Wow. And so the police were called, and the neighbor called the police because of, this shooting. At that point, they didn't have any idea that Miguel or Hector was deceased. And so, so on July 4th, two of my boys passed. Yeah.
How does that feel saying that now? I know that it's been a few months now and everything, but is it still fresh for you?
This pilgrimage through grief, and that's really the word that I have landed on, of what, because it used to be just a journey, and then Sue and I just recently had been talking about the I don't know if you've heard this pilgrimage in Spain. It's called the Camino de Santiago, and as chance would have it, Santiago is Miguel's middle name. Sue, did you know that?
I did not know that.
Yeah. So I have heard about this pilgrimage quite a few years ago. And then and I actually watched a Martin Sheen movie last night about the pilgrimage. And that's really what this grief journey, it's not a journey, it was a pilgrimage. It is a pilgrimage. It's surreal to still tell the story, but there's acceptance there. I mean, there's no changing it, is that my son, for whatever reason, stabbed his dad. And to be clear, that what was going on Sunday night, I don't think was an all-out battle and argument. I think Miguel was just talking about things that Hector was not comfortable with. Miguel would talk about astral travel and the Matrix and all of this, and Hector is no party to that. And so I don't really think that it was I don't know how this is going to land. I don't think it was a violent act of murder.
It was a psychotic break, it sounds like, or something. I mean, it wasn't like in the heat of an argument where he just, like, with rage.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
Right. And there is a lot of peace that has accompanied this whole entire pilgrimage, and peace that it defies description and understanding. Yeah.
Well, and they did think that Hector died instantly, never knew, never suffered, hopefully.
Right.
How did they end up, they must have gone to where Miguel lived and found Hector then after the police?
Yeah.
Is that how that unfolded?
Yes, because, as it would happen, the responding officer, she's a female police officer, had arrested Miguel before on a gun incident, that he was shooting a handgun in the backyard into the ground. Okay, he wasn't shooting at people. He was just, so he had gotten arrested. She was the arresting officer, and she was also a church friend of Hector's. So this woman knew Hector, and she knew that Miguel belonged to Hector. So when they responded to the gun fatality at the neighbor's house, of course, she's going to go over to Hector's house. And interesting, I just found this out maybe a month, 6 weeks ago in a conversation with her, who I want you to know that I consider her a friend of mine. And to be able to speak to the responding officer on such a different level, she said that that was only her second night on night duty, that she would only have maybe 2 or 3 times a year. And like, it wasn't her usual shift, her usual work shift. And that was only the second night. And I explained to her, it was very clear to me that she was positioned to take care of my boys, that she handled it in the most serving and beneficial way to our family.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, she's like, wow, I never thought about that. And I was like, oh, that's very crystal clear to me, is that you were positioned there to take care of my boys like nobody else would have.
Oh,
Yeah.
I love how you say your boys.
Yeah.
It's endearing and sad at the same time. When you first got the news, I mean, did you go numb, go into shock? Do you remember even what you thought? I think you had mentioned that you asked, is Miguel dead? And then,
yeah, I really wanted to know that, and I was relieved when my sister-in-law said that. And
because you knew then he didn't have to face everything that he did.
Yeah.
And then did you call your daughter right away, or what, how did that?
So she lives about maybe 5 hours from me. And, there's just so many parallels that happen. If your audience, didn't listen to the first episode that I was on, I actually was a guest on your podcast about a year ago. And it was talking about my own father's suicide.
That's right.
when I was 4. And I can only, at the time, I could only slightly grasp the task that my mother had in telling her little kids that their dad was gone. And I found, this many years later, I found myself in a similar situation, in sharing that kind of news with my own daughter. I could, for a split second, I considered calling her, and then I was like, oh no, I need to be there with her. And so yes, certainly I went more numb. I cried a little bit. It's really, I remember trying to brush my teeth, and I'm like trying not to cry. It's really hard to brush your teeth when you're trying not to cry, but you're crying. And you're just like, I mean, there were a few times that I just had to stop, and I'm sobbing, and I'm trying not to, choke on the toothpaste and all of this stuff. And it was just such a, in hindsight, like, that's something that's really hard to comprehend, that your brain can't even wrap itself around. And in that state of mind, I packed 3 changes of clothes, and I'm going to drive, and in my mind, I'm going to go get my daughter and bring her back to me. And that doesn't make any sense at all. But that's all. I was like, I'll just grab 3 changes of clothes, get some clean socks. Let's go. Get your toothbrush, and just threw everything in the back of my Jeep, and then I was off. So
I feel like that describes grief in a nutshell. Like you're doing, I mean, all of that where you don't really, you're not really thinking about stuff. You're just reacting. And then the mundane tasks become like so much harder, just like brushing your teeth, like what you're saying. Like I feel like that's very relatable to anyone who's experienced grief of any kind, where you struggle with that, I guess.
Yeah, and even though we're laughing, at it, I mean, still, we're human. We still have to brush our teeth, but it shows the human side of it. Like you can't just become this superhuman and handle this. Like you fumble, and you just, I don't even know how you get through it. I guess pure adrenaline at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
So, gosh, well,
so
go on.
I guess I would like to know a little bit about Miguel before all this happened. Was he struggling with mental stuff, mental issues or anything, or was this kind of a random occurrence, or was there like a build up to get to this point?
Yeah. So of course, I'm gonna give you my perspective.
Sure.
Okay.
Right.
And it doesn't mean it's the truth. It just means it's my perspective. And I'm also, I just would like to clarify that this is from ground level. And I really want to pull Sue into the conversation about, because her superpower is helping us see from a higher perspective. And so I can give you my perspective from ground level, and it doesn't mean that that's how he experienced life. Sure. It just means that this was my experience in hindsight.
Yeah, your observations, kind of.
Right.
And Sue, you spent a lot of time talking with Delores about Miguel prior to July 4th, correct? Had you ever met him?
I had never met him in person, but we had spent quite a lot of time in coaching.
And you kind of have a higher perspective of his soul.
Yes.
Okay. So it'd be interesting to get both of your descriptions of Miguel for that reason.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
So, the whole time that Miguel was growing up, I struggled with depression. Mm-hmm. And there were bad days, and there were less bad days. Mm-hmm. I guess that I had good days, but sometimes when you're in depression, it's a survival state of being. Mm-hmm. And so, gosh, it's really, in hindsight, and with so much compassion, it's hard to parent a high needs child, number one, And when you're when you don't feel like you're very healthy. And so I acknowledge the challenge and the factors that were going on. And I was challenged by my own existence. And then here comes this kid. And I'm like, wow, I'm really challenged now. And he was always a high energy kind of kid. And so he turns 6, his birthday's in August, and he turned 6. And so he was the youngest of the youngest to go to school. And, I could have held him back a year, like some parents do, but I was like, oh no, this kid needs to go to school. I need this kid to go to school. And I mean, that depression and that darkness, it made breathing hard, and everything was just so amped up in my experience. And so he went to half-day kindergarten, and that's when the real battle and struggle really came to the forefront. And an experience stands out in my mind so clearly is that here it is, half-day kindergarten. It's kindergarten, people, and he doesn't get a smiley sticker on his behavior chart for 6 weeks.
Wow.
And I'm like going, gosh, is there nothing that we can find good about what this kid is doing and how he's behaving? And so, I think that adds all into it, is that it really continued his identity of not being a good boy.
Boy, that's a whole nother topic, because good Lord, give every kid a smiley in kindergarten at least once.
Yeah. And so here he is, this innocent, sweet, little rambunctious 6-year-old. And we took him into the developmental psychiatrist, and he was diagnosed with ADHD, with a multitude, several learning disabilities. The biggest one that I reflect on is that he was diagnosed at 6 as oppositional defiant disorder.
Which is crazy. Wow.
Yeah. And so that began his life under the microscope, and on medications, in therapy, a million doctor's appointments. He had asthma and allergies, and
Poor guy.
Now, again, this is from ground level, is that I did not feel capable to live outside the box and do anything against what the experts said was good for my child.
Well, even without depression, I think that would be difficult. You rely on them. That's why they're the experts.
Mm-hmm. And I was not in a emotional or spiritual state to be able to question things. And that is now my superpower, because of, decades of not being able to question or dig deeper into what they say is the best.
And this really circles back to your first interview in a lot of ways, because growing up, you had a million questions. Delores has a profound superpower of asking questions, and she asks the most powerful questions that open up new perspectives and call in new wisdom from the angels all the time. But as a small child growing up in a small town that's very religious, with this big family secret about the dad's suicide, questions were anything but encouraged. And so here you are, I mean, it's no wonder that you were struggling with depression, really.
Mhm.
You were told not to be Delores.
Yes, that's what we talked about in the episode about a year ago. And that's your first meeting with Dolores? That was your impression? Was that she just had a superpower of being able to question things and ask powerful questions?
If it didn't come out in our first session, it definitely came out by the second one because it is so Dolores. But it was also so forbidden.
Okay.
So how is that how you guys met? It was through the angel coaching, or was it both? You guys obviously you knew Miguel, so that means you must have had some sort of relationship beforehand, or was it just because of?
Oh no, I didn't know Miguel personally.
Oh,
We met because we were both speakers on a summit,
okay.
and so Dolores checked out my interview on the summit, and I checked out hers, and we came together to talk because we felt resonance with each other, and we decided that we were going to trade coaching. So
Oh,
Dolores became my coach, and I became her coach, and once a week we would get together, and yeah, it was.
how long ago was that?
Do you know Dolores?
June of 2021.
Okay. So year and a
A year and a half,
year and a
or
quarter.
maybe a year and a
something,
quarter.
Yeah.
So a little over a year before the event.
And how
as-
soon
as
into
we
all
were
of that
having-
did Dolores start sharing about Miguel?
Oh gosh, I think one of your first sessions probably was talking about, guilt and shame and grief as a mother, not having done things right. And
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, what is your higher perspective of Miguel's spirit and soul, Sue?
so many children have been coming in for a while now, who are not able, in many cases, like if you think of autistic children, who are not able to conform to society's expectations or their parents' needs for how they should be. And Miguel was definitely part of this group of children who is coming in at a really foundational level to teach unconditional love. You cannot punish me into behaving the way you want. You cannot reward me into behaving the way you want. I am going to be me. I am not a horse to be broken. I am not going to conform to anybody's expectations. And I think Dolores was saying at one point, even when he was very young, he was very straightforward about that. You can punish me all you want. But what did he say?
He would say, it just makes me want to do it more. And you're just like, well, good God, what am I supposed to do with that? Is that he would be motivated to be more Miguel.
Wow, and he knew that about himself at an early age?
Mm-hmm.
He was extremely bright. He was very self-aware, and he was very active. And so in maybe a different school environment, he might not have been, the bad kid. But most schools, the teacher has a lot on her plate or his plate, right? They have a lot of kids. They want to try and maintain some sort of control of the classroom.
Mhm.
And when you have a little kid who wants to run around and do their own thing and not do what you tell them to do, that's really disruptive. So it's easy to understand all the perspectives here because we've all seen all of this. And Miguel came with a higher purpose. So he had pre-birth soul agreements with Dolores, with his dad Hector. And the perhaps interesting thing in that context is that he was also adopted. So he had these soul agreements.
That's right.
But he was not born to Dolores and Hector.
Okay.
This is kind of related, and maybe you guys don't. I don't know if you guys have an opinion on this or not, but do you think that kids are getting diagnosed with things too easily, or is it accurate in the school system?
I think it's really indicative of what we see across the board in our society.
Right.
Something's wrong, here's a pill for it.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of reasons behind that. It certainly is lucrative to medicate things rather than finding some other solution to them. And it's certainly more lucrative to medicate things forever than to have a cure. So there's part of that going on that's, a bigger picture issue here. There's the other bigger picture issue of almost all schools, the classrooms are crowded.
and they're underfunded.
Yes.
Okay.
And the teachers are under a lot of stress to try and
Yeah, absolutely.
facilitate learning in a really challenging environment. So there's some of that as well.
Yeah.
And then there's sort of momentum, right? It's just, oh yeah, here's another one. Yeah, we'll give you the same diagnosis as the other 6 kids that were in here earlier today. It's an epidemic, and there are other factors as well. There are food related factors involved. And then at the higher perspective, there are factors related to the time that we're experiencing right now on the planet. So we're in the middle of leaving the old patriarchy, dysfunctional masculine reality that's been going on here for hundreds of years, where everything is based on fear and scarcity, greed and control and manipulation. If you all you have to do is look at the media in any sense, and you can tell that, they want to induce more fear, and fear makes people easier to control.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's not coming. So we are at the pivotal point in humanity, where humanity is going to transition into a new reality that's based on love and based on abundance consciousness instead of scarcity consciousness. And so we're living from compassion and in community and collaboration and kindness, as opposed to business is war, every man for himself. I better get my piece of the pie and a little bit more, because I don't know if there's ever going to be another pie. When we live in this new reality of abundance, let's just make more pies, right? Oh, you don't like pie? Okay, we'll make cake. No problem. Like, it's very different and much more harmonious. And it's the harmony of the divine feminine and the divine masculine instead of the dysfunctional feminine and the dysfunctional masculine that we've been living. So there have been huge waves of people coming to the planet to facilitate the shift.
Is that going to happen in our lifetime? I'm waiting.
Yeah, yeah.
It's happening. It's happening in our circle.
Like,
meaning I see it happening in what we're doing and the people that are coming into our world, and my reality has shifted since Katie came into my life to to more understanding and getting the dysfunction. Like, if we just even use your parallel in our family, it's kind of just going away, and understanding and forgiveness and compassion, like you say, and love is replacing it. But in the world, I'm glad to hear this, because things must have to get really, really bad before they get better, because we're really hitting bottom.
So I'm so glad you said that, because there are a few different things going on there. One is that most of the things we're seeing now have been going on. We just weren't seeing them before.
Okay.
So part of it is that the darkness is coming into the light.
Okay.
Right? The only way to get rid of darkness is to turn on the light. So the darkness is coming into the light to be transformed. And there have been forces at play on the planet that are leaving. So humanity has been enslaved for centuries. And those who would control humanity are leaving also. So the transformation can be, when we reach, let's say, readiness, it can be instantaneous. The cool thing is we probably won't know that it happened. We'll just wake up in the new reality, and it will seem, we won't experience that weird discontinuity like in a Hallmark movie where you go to sleep and you're like the single professional in the penthouse apartment, and you wake up the next day like in suburbia with a husband and 2 kids. It won't be that. It'll be much more like, oh yeah, of course it's supposed to be like this.
Okay.
So part of what I'm here to do, and many others like me, is to facilitate that in the kindest, most grace-filled unfolding possible. So Miguel and these other kids who would not conform, who are literally not capable of conforming, were part of an early wave trying to shift the approach to relationships, because at the end of the day, it's all about relationships. We are relationship creatures.
Yeah.
But why did Miguel have to suffer so much in order to do that? Is it because he wasn't getting his message across? like meaning you say he was put on this planet to teach unconditional love and unconditional acceptance. But like especially in society, he didn't get that. And so did he?
And in some cases he
He
did,
did?
right? So certainly from
Well, from
Delores
Dolores, but yeah, like
and from his dad. So that's pretty amazing
okay,
when you think about it, because here they had this challenging child, and a lot of parents would not tolerate some of his behavior,
okay,
right? He would not be welcome in the house.
okay.
And he even had a really beautiful experience with this police officer who found him.
Oh,
Do you want to share about Dolores?
When she found him,
No, about the experience after the shooting, the gun charge.
shooting into the
oh,
ground.
the gun
Yeah.
charge. Oh, yes. So I don't like, he told me his version of the story, which is always so humorous. I'm just like, oh, that's a funny story, Miguel. But he said that there was a rabid cat that was going to attack him, and I'm like, that's a funny story. And so he shot the gun into the ground, and she only charged him with a misdemeanor level of discharges. So number one, it wasn't a felony charge, it was a misdemeanor. And then after he was all released and everything was taken care of, he actually went down to the police station and apologized to her for his behavior.
Oh.
And,
wow.
I think that, again, that was just another piece of preparation for what was ultimately going to happen. And Sue, let's really talk about how we learn about unconditional love. Let's talk about that, because that's really what is rising up in me. Miguel did his soul mission perfectly.
Okay.
And I will tell you that has been part of my meditation and my contemplations, is the honor that I have for his soul of choosing such a difficult and challenging path. And there was no other way to do it. So let's talk about, how do we learn unconditional love?
And the short answer is, those beings who are easy to love don't teach us about unconditional love. It's the ones who are really prickly. It's the ones who are really challenging to love require us to drop our conditions. And the ones who can't be conditioned to behave the way we want them to. So there was no way that you were going to get Miguel, even at 6 years old, to behave exactly the way you wanted him to. So you had to love him the way he was.
So
it's
there's
really
a difference between love and like legality, for instance. So like you can maybe not agree with what Miguel, like even to this day, obviously you don't agree with the fact that Miguel killed his father, but you still love him. And that's the unconditional, it's not unconditional acceptance of what they do. It's unconditional
Right.
love for who they are, their spirit, their soul.
Well, and that's a really good point, because it is acceptance. Because if we don't accept what they do, then we're fighting with reality. And that is the biggest cause of pain and suffering on the planet.
Even if it's illegal?
So it's acceptance is different from approval.
Oh, okay. Yep.
Or validation, but we have to accept it because it's
Because it
done.
happened. Okay, got it.
Right.
But not approval necessarily.
And let's say that Miguel had not been killed at the neighbor's house. We would suppose that he would, after he got out of the hospital, that he would be arrested and go to jail for killing his father.
Right.
But my peace comes from accepting the fact that this is what happened, and I love that human, and something's going on. Yeah. Alejandra, my daughter, she is a very peaceful presence in my life. She does not teach me unconditional love. She might teach me peacefulness because of what she brings into my life. But there are very few things that prickle me about that girl. Her job is not teaching me, by contrast, what unconditional love is. Miguel, on the other hand, boy, truckloads of things that human and that soul taught me is really what is unconditional love. What is accepting what is and being peaceful in the storm.
Mm-hmm.
So I can't help but go back to my brother, her father, because my mom would always say, um, it's about unconditional love. But my viewpoint was, but what he's doing is hurting people and hurting me and illegal later when he was an adult. And yeah, I understood that she loved him, but she also like gave him money to do illegal acts and things like that. So okay, I accept that he did those things, but I mean, do we have to help them do those things? Do you know what I mean? Like I'm struggling with this.
Like, is there
What is unconditional love? Is it just the love, or is it like, was my mom mislabeling herself? Because to me, she was enabling, codependent. You know, the whole thing. Pay for it to go away. That to me wasn't really love. I didn't think.
like the difference between enabling and loving someone, I guess? Or is that kind of what you're saying? Or
Yeah,
like,
yeah. I mean, I get. I just think she thought it was love, but I don't think that was the way. I think she loved him, but I don't think that was the way. That's not what she. When she was doing those things, that wasn't her unconditional love. That was something else.
Mhm.
Yes. So codependence is very different from unconditional love. I mean, codependence is a dysfunctional dynamic, right? And it's caused by very rational things. It's caused most likely by the way she was raised and the dynamics in her family of origin. And one of the things that we see over and over again, because a lot of our clients are coming from challenging family dynamics, is that it's usually better in their family of origin than it was in their parents' family of origin, which was better than their parents' family of origin. Or to say it the other way, it keeps getting better on down the line, right? It's gentler. It's still dysfunctional, but it's not as bad as they had it. They're doing the best they can. Very few people on this planet are born to, ascended masters. We're all born to people who have whatever level of dysfunction they have. And that too will change, but that's a whole separate conversation. But to come back to what is unconditional love, let's start with you said, what is love,
Yeah.
right? And most people on this planet have been conditioned by their parents, by society, by the media, movies, to do love, especially romantic love, as manipulation, obsession, control. It's you don't write, you don't call, you don't love me anymore, you don't bring me flowers, these are my needs and you're not meeting them, and it's very dysfunctional. This is not unconditional love.
Okay.
And the thing about unconditional love that we want to be sure to say to everybody is it starts with unconditional love of self. So when I can be in a place of I love all aspects of myself, I love the part of myself that can be clumsy, I love the part of myself that can say the wrong thing, I love the part of myself that gained 10 pounds, like whatever. I love me, period. End of story. And I can soothe myself. I can nurture myself. I can reparent myself in a way that my physical parents may not be able to do, especially if they passed. It's a lot harder for them. So when I come from this place of unconditional love for me first, then it's very easy to see what to do with the unconditional love for another. So, for example, I used to be in a relationship with someone with narcissistic personality disorder. It's not in my best and highest good to be with that person. I can love him unconditionally from a distance, but not up close. So it doesn't serve me to be destabilized every single day by somebody who doesn't even know that they're doing that, because it's such an innate part of his dysfunction. So I can be unconditional love in a business meeting with a potential business partner and see from higher perspective, oh, this person's wounding makes them move through their life until they heal it in a way that's very manipulative, in a way that can't be trusted. They will say whatever needs to be said in order to get what it is that they want. So from that higher perspective, I can love that person unconditionally and choose not to give them my money.
Got it.
So it gives us access to more awareness. It gives us access to more choice than when we're in that codependent dynamic, or when we're in a knee-jerk reaction to something that's a trauma trigger from earlier in life, whether it's from childhood or a past relationship.
You think
Whatever.
that that's so that was an example of a husband and wife, right? Or relationship of some sort. Is that the same kind of dynamic between a mother and son though? Because a mother wants to take care of their kid and help them and everything. How does a mother do that without enabling them to further harm other people? You know, like I don't even know if you guys know the answer. Like it's something that I think about. It, and also with like our family and stuff. It's yeah, you love your kid, but it's like what physically is done that is different between enabling them and just loving them. I guess it's just the same as what you were saying too.
Delores, do you want to
Yeah.
jump in?
Well, and I will say that that was after the divorce, and we kind of, the boys stayed together and the girls stayed together, is that was often my leading question. How can I best support Miguel in the things that he is involved with? And how can I help him or serve him without enabling him? And I will tell you that was a leading question of my mothering experience to this young adult. And boundaries, I think, are incredibly critical in these kind of situations where they don't automatically know what the boundary is. So there was actually one mental health practitioner that informally said that Miguel was narcissistic and that she would not treat him. And so he wanted what he wanted, and he was going to get it. Mm-hmm. And so if you want to term that manipulative, narcissistic, whatever you want, but he wanted what he wanted. My question always came back to, how can I keep myself emotionally safe, aka love myself, and best support that other human? And I would say even when he was a young child, that kind of question would have benefited me, but I wasn't able to articulate that kind of question. And so if it makes you sacrifice your boundaries, your emotional health, you really ask that question. I don't think love makes you do that.
Okay.
So I think people really crave simple answers, and I love that the angels are always so good at simplifying things. And what they're saying is, while every circumstance is different, and even within the same relationship between a mother and son, for example, every situation is going to be different. But the thing that's universal, that holds across all situations and all relationships, is to tune into our divine guidance. To pause for a moment when we feel triggered, give ourselves 3 deep breaths, close your eyes, take 3 deep breaths, and then tune into your guidance and say, is there something for me to do? Is there something for me to say? What's really going on here? So when we can ask these very open-ended questions, what's really going on here, we get incredible insight. And then with that insight, is there something for me to do or say? And maybe there's not, maybe there is, but the divine can see the whole picture, right? So when we tune into divine guidance, we have so much more ability to, first of all, be unconditionally loving to self. And then, so always first be unconditionally loving to self. And then, is there something for me to do? And the something for me to do is going to be different every time. And sometimes the answer is nothing. Sometimes it's part of that person's soul journey, life journey, to do that thing that they're going to do, that we would give anything on earth to stop them from doing. But there's nothing we can do to stop them because it's something that they're meant to be doing. So the thing that's hardest to accept at ground level is that I can't tell what is in the best and highest good of someone else. I would love to be able to, but I can't.
And we'll move on to forbidden grief after this, but I do think that Grandma had very low self-esteem, even in her 60s, 50, 60, like even as an accomplished adult, she still was very insecure. And so she really didn't love herself unconditionally. So therefore probably couldn't love my brother that way, in the healthy way. So
yeah.
But anyway, yeah. So here's where, I mean, if we want to talk about no more secrets as a term, Delores, you reached out to me and Katie because you feel like a lot of people are probably keeping secrets who have gone through something like you have gone through. Because, like, fast forward 3 years from now, if you were an unhealthy person, you may never mention Miguel to somebody that new that you meet, even though he's part of you and a huge part of you and still is and matters. So that's a huge secret to bear. So it seems like you and Sue came up with this concept of forbidden grief, correct? And tell me where it's going.
I had really experienced it when the foundation of it, when I was in southern New Mexico, and we had brought Hector's body back to his hometown where he was going to be buried. And so we're surrounded. I mean, really, put yourself in that picture. Is that I'm surrounded. I'm not even going to put my daughter in this. I'm surrounded by people who love and adore Hector. And there is so much turmoil in the crowd about Hector's son, because Hector's son murdered him. And so, like, when I was first going through it, I felt very silenced in my grief for the passing of my son.
Oh.
And here I was, the ex-wife, and I'm like, wow, how did I get in this story? Like, this is like, I can't make this up. Like, what is happening here? And I was very inspired, and I feel like I was inspired to keep the funeral services of Hector and Miguel very separate. I don't know. Maybe I was wrong in that. I don't know. Maybe it would have helped. But I actually feel like I did it for the benefit of my daughter, because I really wanted her to have a pure experience of mourning the passing of her father. She had a wonderful, beautiful relationship with him. She is, I would say, one of the rare young ladies in this world that have had such a loving relationship with her father. She was very blessed in that. And I didn't want to make it convoluted with how she was feeling about her brother and that he was the whole cause of this, blah, blah, blah. And so I did feel very silenced in being able to even talk about Miguel. And when we were going through those 3 weeks there in New Mexico, I really just didn't even talk about Miguel. And I accepted that, you know what, we'll deal with that later. I'll handle that in a different way. But
that sucks. That sucks for you.
Like it was crazy.
Because you're grieving, and you lost your son's father and then your son, and you can't speak of him. You feel like you shouldn't. And that's a parallel or a small example of the bigger problem when mothers go through this.
Mm-hmm.
And is that what brought you to this idea of forbidden grief?
Yes. Sue, let's talk about that. Go ahead.
So one thing that we've seen really get bigger and bigger since, let's say, the 70s, when pop psychology became a thing, is when a child, even a grown child, does something, one of the first thoughts that crosses people's minds is, what did the parents do to that poor child to make them do that?
Yep.
And it as parents, most parents are taught that when you have a successful child, it's a reflection on you as a parent, right? So your child goes to Harvard Law School and, passes the bar and gets a great job. And so you are a successful parent and you feel really proud, and that's considered normal. But at the other end of that exact same spectrum is your child does something bad or wrong, and now you are shamed and blamed as a parent. So it's this huge thing in society, actually, that you are responsible for your child long after, you were responsible for making sure that they were fed and clothed and went to school and, taken care of. You're responsible for everything they do and say. And we're even seeing people wanting to punish the parents of shooters now.
Yes.
For making the gun too readily available, or so it's a growing movement of punishing the parents. When I was growing up, there were families that you could go drink when you were underage in their basement and hang out. And then a few years later, those parents would have gone to jail if something had happened to any of those kids. The kids weren't considered capable of making their own decisions. And so it's been this trend that's been gaining a lot of momentum to blame the parents and even to take legal action against the parents. So here are all these parents who oftentimes, like in the case of Delores and Hector, they had 2 children. The 2 children turned out very different. They were the same people, the same parents. Maybe they parented them differently because they were different children, like we all, everybody's different. But society says, you're a bad parent. You must have been really horrible to that child. How did you abuse that child to make them turn out like that?
And so where do those people go to grieve?
Exactly. They don't get to grieve. And then you start turning the blame and shame in on yourself. Is that, oh my goodness, how many flashes of memories of shaming myself of how I treated Miguel, what I did, what I didn't do, what he wanted, what I ignored, how I neglected him. And there were many sessions that Sue and I worked together to help me heal that and dissolve that of, all of the shame and blame and guilt and what, society's right. I am a terrible mom, and I've got 101 examples, specific examples of how I did my child wrong, and this really is my fault. So no way can you, how can you grieve the death of a murderer?
Right.
Like, that's forbidden. Like don't even go there. And you're a terrible mom, so you don't even deserve your kid doesn't deserve to be grieved because he's a murderer, and you don't deserve to go through the grieving healing process because you're responsible for it.
Ugh.
It's like the difference of perspective of you're grieving a murderer or you grieving your son. You know, like they're two separate entities that just happen to be in one person.
Yeah, right. And society looks at that person and says, good riddance.
Right.
How could you possibly grieve that person?
Right.
And then down the road, you start to hide it from people you meet. Again, like Miguel never existed, and 5 years, 10 years from now, you have one daughter. I mean, again,
one
if
child, yeah.
if you don't find a way to be able to not be forbidden, and so this is what you're offering to other mothers, right? Mostly mothers or parents? For now, mothers of. Does their child have to have died? Or is it just mothers of a child that does something that is considered wrong or heinous to society, or on any level of wrong to society? And where do they go? I suppose the biggest one would be if that child dies with that reputation. Then where do you go with that grief?
Yeah. So we're finding that what started out pretty specific for moms whose child died while doing something that society says is shameful, right? Committing a crime or committing suicide. It's becoming broader. So some of the moms who are following the live streams that we're doing and the videos we're creating and the content that we're putting out there to serve moms are just raising a child who's a challenge, or are their child died like by an accidental drowning or something that they feel like they should have been able to prevent. So much of what seems to unify the moms that this speaks to is the shoulda, woulda, couldas, we call it, and the what ifs, right? Like, what if I had done this differently? What if I had done that differently? If only I hadn't done that thing. It's a fairly universal experience, I think, for all parents, really. I think all of us can look back, whether you're a parent or not, at your life and go, oh, wish I hadn't done that. Wish I hadn't said that. So a big part of it is creating a space where it is safe and accepted to grieve whatever happened, whether that person is in prison now or in rehab now, or in a grave now, or in school and thriving as best as they can, or the bad kid in kindergarten. So creating a space where the moms can understand what they're going through, because everyone's different, and there's a lot of things that moms have in common.
Okay.
That they feel isolated because this is not something that you go talk to at the PTA meeting. This is
right.
not, and
is it a group setting, or is it you just do one-on-one sessions or 2-on-1 sessions, or how does it look?
So it's a group program that includes one-on-one session a month to start, and then eventually that can be optional. And there's a group coaching one a month. And then there's a community, not on Facebook, but on the Mighty Networks platform, where it's actually more private, where moms can ask questions, support each other, as well as receiving support from us.
Cool. And do you say up front to the new clients what happened with your son, Delores?
Yeah. And, I used to be a little more tender about this. I just don't want to trigger somebody, but I have no intention of trying to trigger someone, but this is the truth. And I am giving myself permission to speak the truth. This is what happened. This is what I know about it. And it gives us permission to speak very frankly about things that other people may not feel okay about talking about. And you know what? It's the reality of what happened. And
it gives you, I think it gets rid of all the bullshit of first getting to know somebody, and you jump right into the meat, and whether or not, I mean, obviously if they're on your site, they're interested, but even outside of forbidden grief, whether or not they're in a place to be receptive to it, that's the question. But I know for me, now that the book has come out and Katie found out that her father had raped me so many times, now it's almost, I say it quite often, whereas I never said it before telling her, except for to my mom, which she didn't believe me. And now I find, because I'm saying it so casually, even sometimes, people open up to me more. They just out of the blue, they start people I never thought would talk to me about not the same kind of abuse, but things that maybe
Abuse in general,
that
yeah.
they didn't think even was a thing at the time. And so I feel like that's what you're doing for people by sharing the raw truth. This is what happened. And, if I am an open book, literally and figuratively, to talk about these really nasty things that happen in life in order to make them better, not to dwell, not to wallow. So that's what I think is so fantastic about what you guys are doing, and what you said, Sue, about Miguel, that he was put on this planet for a reason. Okay, and beyond the unconditional love, now it's this, and
Yes.
boy, does his life ever matter, and it still matters.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we always said about your dad. Like, we wrote a book. She came into my life because of his behavior, which was very negative that night, especially. Then we write a book about him during the time of that he dies. But then we start doing talks, and then there's a podcast. And it never would have happened if Ken hadn't been so troubled.
Mm.
And he was a tortured being on this planet. So to me, it's an act of love. Talk about unconditional love now, because I like to say his life mattered, and he was my abuser. But if we can make something good come of it, we said with our book, even if it's just one person we can help, it's worth it, and it's always a lot more than that. And so it's kind of all you have to hold on to too, when you go back to the humanness of Katie not having a father, for instance, and having to go to her wedding without her father and that kind of thing. At least you've got something to hold on to when the physical person isn't there, So, for you, meaning.
Yeah. No, I mean,
Ditto.
Same.
What she said.
No, it's a good point though. I mean, it's not the same situation, but it's a type of, I mean, I'll use your word, forbidden grief, where I know the type of person my dad was, but I still was sad to not have him walk me down the aisle at my wedding just recently, and I was still sad I didn't get a father-daughter, and I'm sad I don't have a relationship with him, and it's still grief, but there's acceptance of knowing who he was, and not in any way justifying any of it, but missing what could have been, I guess. So it's,
that is forbidden
I feel
grief,
like
actually.
we can relate a little bit, yeah.
Yeah, because I know Terry, my husband who just died, he was terrible to my brother that way. And so, like, when he died, when my brother died, Terry said, "This is the best fucking Christmas present I've ever had," because it was on Christmas Day.
On Christmas Day.
and then I was crying because my brother died.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, "Why are you crying? You should be dancing." And I'm like, I don't feel like dancing.
Yeah.
And so I never could talk anything about that with Terry in the years before, it was like, good riddance, you're off the planet, done, you never existed, blech. And that kind of sucks.
Yeah. I will say it's great that you are talking about it so soon after the deaths, because it took me like a long time to really be able to talk about it, and I was able to, I mean, once I did start doing it and through writing the book and stuff, I was able to pull myself out of that grief depression that happens if you can't get it out, so it's great that you're able to not only help other people talk about their stories, but to get your story out, because it really does make a difference for everyone involved.
Well, in hindsight, I look back at how I was prepared for this. Is that, writing the book, being a co-author in that book, Invisible No More, Invincible Forevermore. And that was, to actually submit my story talking publicly about my father's suicide that happened 50 years ago. And I was like, oh my gosh, I don't know if I'm brave enough to go public with this story. And it was literally 50 years prior. And that happened last year, being on your podcast, meeting Sue, doing all of this work, and all of the personal transformation that I have been doing, right about the time of the divorce and such, is very much part of this. And I will share this story with you, is that in the early days after the event on July 4th, Hector did come to me, and he's often with me. I stopped by Walgreens to get coffee this morning, and there was a guy walking away from me that had an exact shirt that Hector always wore. And I just stood there in the doorway of Walgreens, just staring at that guy's shirt. I was like, hi, Hector, there you are, And so Hector is often with me. And he told me in this visitation right after their passing that, and it was kind of like he was in an underground control center, command center cave thing, like we were superheroes. And he's like talking to me on the walkie-talkie, the earbud, and he's like, Delores, you're in position now. And that was his words to me. And I'm like, oh my gosh, just hilarious as a spirit. Like, what is going on? He's like, you have been positioned for this work. Hector and Miguel are now in non-physical. We are still your companions. We are still your teammates. And you now in physical need to go forward with this message of the grief process, the grief pilgrimage, being able to grieve whatever the heck we want to grieve. And if it is, Katie, if you don't want to grieve your dad's death, more power to you. Mary, if you want to grieve your brother's death, more power to you. And however the heck you want to do that and go on that pilgrimage so that you can get to the point of that transformation, that's your choice. And so I'm just like, I just want to be a spokesperson to give you permission, like I have any authority, but just give you permission to grieve the way that your heart desires to grieve, or not.
Yeah.
Your choice.
Yeah.
And there's so much programming around how you're supposed to grieve, right?
Yeah.
Like, if you're happy, God forbid, 3 days after somebody dies, then clearly you're not grieving right. Shouldn't you be sad right
That's
now?
my stepdaughter, Terry's daughter. We are now estranged because she doesn't think I'm grieving right.
And then when you are sad, after a while, people can't tolerate being around you anymore. So then
why are you still crying?
You're grieving grief, but I don't want to be with you. So it's grief is really uncomfortable in our society. So Delores and I were actually talking yesterday about starting these grief retreats where people can come for a few days in a space where they can really go into the chrysalis, into the cocoon, as the caterpillar, and come out feeling more like a butterfly. So as maybe a way to start the journey
Okay.
with
Well,
us.
that actually leads me to my question of where you hope to see your program going in the future, and how can Katie and I help with that vision?
Yeah.
Dolores, you want to weigh in?
You know what? I am honored and humbled to be part of this journey. Understanding, bringing more understanding and such compassionate understanding about death and about the grieving. What is grief? I have driven Sue crazy about asking that same question. But what is grief? Like, what is grief? I think that we are bringing new understanding about what grief is, what death is. And we simply began with the event that happened on July 4th. There's so much love and humility inside of my experience of where we are going with this. And it will be revealed to us one step at a time. But as Sue and I just talked about this yesterday, is that and I listen to our conversations as an actual participant. Like, would I like to do that as a mom whose child did what my child did, and I lost my friend, my ex-husband? You know, what would I like? And to go on a retreat and to actually be in such a safe and sacred space, to be able to be secure in my expression of that, and also to gain a deeper, a higher understanding and perspective of what this whole experience is about for me personally and as a collective. And to be in that kind of environment, like, I'm like, Sue, I don't want to be in charge of it. I just want to participate in it. I just want to be one of the people. And I know that I will always benefit from that. So does Miguel's life matter? Oh yeah, it does. Oh yeah, it does. And I journal often about praying for strength and guidance to carry on his legacy. Is that human being, in my short 24 years of experience and path with him, learned volumes about unconditional love, and now about death and grieving. And wow, what a legacy. I honor his soul for the incredibly challenging walk in this life that he chose, that he says, I want to bring more unconditional love. I want to bring more understanding about these things to humanity. I had to be a participant in that. And now I feel like I'm carrying that baton forward. And I often talk and commune with Hector and Miguel. Please make it really clear what I'm supposed to do. And so Hector goes to Walgreens. And so that I see that. I mean, it was the exact shirt. Ladies, I'm telling you, I just stood there and I was like, oh, that's hilarious. Like hilarious. I almost took a picture of that and sent it to my daughter. I'm like, look, your dad was at Walgreens this morning.
Here's Dolores ripping the shirt off this guy's back, you know, like, and then Dolores is arrested, you know.
Right.
I'm like taking a selfie with him. I'm like, hey, dude, can we take a picture?
Oh no, turn around. I want the back of your shirt. Yeah.
I'm not a stalker.
You know what? when you were talking about Ken and Ken's life mattered, it became very, very clear to me. Isn't that a truth about every single person?
Yeah. I think about Katie's brother's name is Joe. And the reason that Joe is named Joe is because my mom had an older brother that lived for one day named Joe. And he died. He was born on February 3rd. He died on February 4th. 50 years later, her brother Joe was born, and they named him Joe. So that one day on the planet resulted in this person's name. This person's.
Yeah.
We remember. We remember. And that was Ken's sensitive soul. He came up with that, and he called Grandma Annabelle and said, "Wait, when did she die? 90." Yeah, because she died in 95. Was Joe born?
I was born, so.
Oh yeah, duh. So yeah, so she called Joe's mother all those years later and said, "I want you to know your first son mattered. Even though he was alive for one day, it mattered to me." So anyway, so yeah, everything, every being, no matter how long you're here, what you do, it matters. But in this case, we're talking about Miguel, and I just want to say I am honored myself to know about Miguel, and I hope that he and Ken are having a good time getting to know each other. And I want to thank Miguel for what has resulted here and what is resulting going forward. Thank you. He's talk about a success, if you want to use that word. Let's define success. Whole nother podcast.
Right. Yeah.
So
his life mattered, though, for sure.
Podcast.
Were you gonna say something?
Well, I was basically just. I think we know how Delores is doing now, but Sue, how do you think Delores is doing now? And that's really kind of our last thing on our outline. And so, anything else you have to offer too? But do you see good things for Delores? I'm sure you do, but just like right now, is it a zigzag kind of recovery? Like where you up, down, but maybe up a little further?
That's a great description of it. The way I see life is a spiral journey. So we circle back around to the same old thing, but at a higher level on the spiral. So it's a very different experience the next time and the next time. And so those things that, take us out for 3 months the first time they happen, next time around on the spiral, it might only take us out for 3 weeks. And next time around, it might only take us out for 1 week. And so it gives us this opportunity to see how far we've come, how much we've grown and evolved and changed. It gives us more clarity. So part of Dolores's journey has clearly been the spiral, but also our last live stream a few days ago was talking about, I miss the blanket of grief. Like it feels like Delores has been able to move through the grief phase of the experience, or at least the really profound grief, and come out of the chrysalis as the butterfly. So I did want to clarify that we weren't saying like in a 3-day weekend you're going to come out of the chrysalis and be done grieving. Grief takes as long as it takes for you, but there is a transformational journey that we're being invited to do. We're seeing grief more and more as a rite of passage that's not really honored in our culture, but that's very important. And that, after the event, Delores will never be the same as she was before the event. She's not meant to be. It was meant to be a transformative experience. And so she's been receiving the gifts of this. And now it's like you've come out of the chrysalis, you've come out of the cocoon and the fog. And it feels to me like you have a lot more energy now. There's less need to kind of hunker down and within the fog of grief, it's a blessing in a lot of ways that you can't see all that other stuff going on out there. It's even hard to imagine that life is going on as normal for everybody else out there. It's this
a sacred space where you can take care of yourself. And so now, as you're emerging from it, the next phase of the journey is, how do I integrate back into regular life again? Would you say that's where you're at?
Yeah. And, to be clear, like I was doing some study yesterday about rite of passages. And I think that people, it may be, well, this is how I went into reading the information, is that, death and being the one who is dying or died, is that we often attribute the rite of passage to that soul. But the grief is a rite of passage for those who are remaining in the physical reality. Is that there's a rite of grief is like I want to redefine what grief is. Grief is a rite of passage for me. And when in my studies yesterday, it was becoming a little more clear that there's a third phase in a rite of passage, and it's actually the incorporation or the integration phase, is that integrating what I experienced in the cocoon. So the integration or the incorporation of the transformation, that I don't just survive the grief and the sadness and then I go back to normal, that it's that pivotal point of I will never be the same. The butterfly is not going to go back to being the caterpillar. And I think that is what may be a little amiss in our society, or in my previous experience, that I didn't really integrate or incorporate the changes and the transformation. And so I feel like, this is 3 solid months of meeting with Sue once or twice a week, and having all of that preparation and doing all of my own personal processing. Now, many people don't have that luxury of going in a cocoon for 3 months, but that is really what I feel like. So when I felt the sadness lift, I feel like I had come out of that cocoon, and that, like, it was a little discombobulating, because I was like, oh wait, I used to be a caterpillar and now I'm a butterfly. I don't even really know what to do being a butterfly. Like, how do I be a butterfly? And that's really where I feel like I am right now, is that, boy, the event put me in the cocoon, and then here I am. I'm different. I'm still Dolores, but I'm different.
Do you have any other questions or
I do not. I appreciate you guys coming on here and talking about, a very raw and emotional, probably, story, and something that I think it's a perspective that not a lot of people are aware of, that other people go through this. Like you said, with the media, or like how society portrays the parents, it's hard. Like, they don't actually see that the parents are struggling too, and I think that's really important for you to share. And I'm so glad that you were able to have so many opportunities now to do that and grieve in the process. So I'm really grateful that you guys were coming on. It's also really great to hear your perspective as well, Sue. This was, I think, really educational and just touching in general, and I'm glad that you guys are letting us be people that you talk to about this, because I think that's an honor. So
Yeah.
Is she amazing as a 30-year-old?
Thanks.
Well, and to be truthful, Katie and Mary, that this is an honor to you and the platform that you have created. The courage of being able to create all that you have out of, on the surface, it would feel like, let's just keep our business to ourselves. Let's just really not talk about that. And and to be able to do it in such a respectful way to your perpetrator, your villain, your other human in this whole entire dance of life. And that speaks very highly of you two, of being able to not throw him under the bus, but still be able to talk about the facts of what happened.
And it's a very different experience to be doing it the way you are, where it transformed you and it created the possibility of so much more, and it opened you up to be so much more authentic and heart-centered and truthful to who you are as beings, as opposed to more guarded, more protected, more shut down, the way some people do treat whatever their transformative event was, right? Where they become attached to that as an identity.
Yeah, and
So,
bitter.
a survivor of
Maybe
XYZ,
bitter and
it
angry,
becomes my badge of honor or my who I am.
Yeah.
And so you two have not taken it on as an identity, but you've taken it on as a catalyst and a transformational possibility. So really honoring you for all the work that you've done, and the role model and example that you shine as for people. Oh yeah,
I got a bad hand. Third paw.
Thank you for saying that. Yeah, I find myself being grateful for how difficult my life was in a lot of ways, but grateful that Ken was my brother, is my brother, because it made me who I am, and I starting to like myself for the first time in 58 years. Took Terry dying for me to really have the space to do that, because he was really sick, so I was doing that. But now it's like, I'm actually doing okay, and so Ken made us pretty tough people.
Yeah, no, I definitely think so.
Yeah.
Well, I think that you ladies would love North Carolina and the retreat center that we previewed yesterday, and just coming in and being able to go up the spiral a little bit further of your healing and your recovery and your transformation.
Road trip.
And
yeah, I got a wedding to plan for anymore, so it's all good.
We also do a lot of laughing, and I think that it's important to keep the humor as well. Like how you just said, I tried to brush my teeth and I was like choking. I mean, that's funny, even though it's sad. It's funny, And I don't know, you gotta laugh. We're humans. We want to laugh too,
Right.
So, and Katie and I have that in common. We're a little bit of a twisted sense of humor at times, but it works for us.
I feel like you have to.
Well, and it's so healing. Yeah. We've all heard laughter is the best medicine, and it really is. It's incredible good for you. And it's a divine perspective. I know the angels have a huge, awesome sense of
good.
Humor. Yeah.
Love to hear that.
So I got a call that my dog is ready. That was good timing, and I think we've gone long enough for this time, but there's always more to say and more ideas to come. I still want to talk about forgiveness with you, and maybe we could bring Sue in on it too, because that just drove me crazy. My mom, you have to forgive Ken, but he's raping me. Like, that's not the same thing, so.
For another time, we'll talk about this, yes.
So, I can go on forever. She knows how to corral me.
Yes, so thank you guys for coming on. Thank you everyone for watching, listening, however you're enjoying this podcast, and we will see you next time.
See you next time.